Welcome in, guys, to the I-80 boys. We're going to talk a little Washington Huskies, the runner-up national title game last season. Christian, I'll start us off with the offense here, and then I'll kick it to you for the defense. Last year, Washington, one hell of a freaking season, 14-1, 10-0 in conference. So the last year of the Pac-12. Offensively, one of the best in the country. It was amazing last season. Michael Penix and all those great receivers, 36 points a game. That was 13th in the country. Here's the big thing, though. I think they lose 21 out of 22 starters, something like that. That's going to be tough this season. Also, new head coach Jedd Fisch from Arizona will be running the helm there. But out with Kalen DeBoer. And, like I said, Jedd Fisch from Arizona. Offensively, they lose all these pieces, Christian. We've talked about this at length this offseason. How are they going to fill those pieces? Like, I know Jed took some players over from Arizona, which is great, and Arizona had an absolutely awesome season last year, but it's going to be tough to replace that receiving core. We talked about Rome Odunze, Jalen Pope, Jalen McMillan. I mean, all these guys got drafted. Penix, obviously, is with your Falcons. It's going to be tough. So, who's leading the helm at quarterback? I would assume it's going to be Will Rogers, your boy from Mississippi State a couple years ago. The guy had some incredible numbers down there. I think it was under Mike Leach that last year, if I'm not mistaken. He's going to probably be the quarterback this year. They did pick up some pieces in the wide receiver room, as I just mentioned, who they lost. They get Trey Watson, Jeremiah Hunter, and Audric Harris, to just name a few. A majority of these guys are three-star transfers, but you got to fill a roster, man. And some of these guys can play too. So the biggest question for me, though, offensively, Christian, is the offensive line. They leave a huge hole there from last season, and they need to get that addressed. And I think they will, but it's going to take some time with Washington this season and what Jedd Fisch wants to do there. Predominantly, Fisch liked to throw the ball a lot at Arizona last season, which will work well with Washington and kind of what they do, but it's going to be tough this year, obviously, coming into the Big Ten with all those great defenses as well. So I'll kick it over to you for the defense, Christian. Enlighten me, my man.
Yeah, Chris, I mean, look, Washington's defense, last year, as good as the offense was, Washington's defense, I felt like last year, was their weak spot, right? Look, here's the thing. They played good in certain elements. They played good when they had to, right? But overall, they were ranked 96th in the country in total defense, right? The Huskies, look, they had more roster turnover, I think, than just about any other program in the country, right? They only get back 3 starters on the defensive side of the ball from last year, which is tough, right? I mean, they're going to be led by Arizona transfers Isaiah Ward and Russell Davis, who combined for 7.5 sacks last year on that defensive line. So that'll be good. There's some familiarity there with Jedd Fisch and some of these players. The linebackers and the defense are probably going to be led by Alfonso Tupatala and Carson Bruner, who combined for 155 tackles last year. So those linebackers have played a lot. So they need that defensive line, obviously, like we talk about all the time, to be able to step up, keep some pressure off of them, be able to flow to the ball, and do what they want to do. Secondary is going to be led by corner Elijah Jackson. He had 61 tackles and 5 pass deflections last year, right? Should be noted that the Arizona Wildcats last year had a top 50 defense. So that is something to kind of keep an eye on as far as this Huskies team, right? Right, we'll jump right in here to their record prediction, Chris. Okay, I'll start us off. So going down the schedule here, Weber State, Eastern Michigan, and even Washington State. Now that Washington State game without Cam Ward, I don't like it so much. I think those are 3 easy wins right there. Then you start getting into conference play. You've got Northwestern. You've got to go travel on the road at Rutgers. That could be a pretty difficult. Right there, right? But it is a night game, so very interesting. Basically, right there. I mean, I'm picking Washington in all those games. To me, the season for them really starts against Michigan. They get to play Michigan at home, but honestly, I don't think it's going to matter. I think Michigan still gets just enough back. They also have a new coach, and we'll cover them later on. They're also breaking in another quarterback, but again, it's going to be a good game. Give me Michigan in that game. Iowa on the road. No, I'm sorry. Give me Iowa in that game. You got to travel to play at Indiana. I think Indiana is going to be a surprise team this year, Chris. They get a new coach as well from James Madison. I think they can be, I think they could be a bowl team this year, right? I think they could do some things this year that will shock some people. New culture for them. You got to travel and play USC. Man, they have a really tough schedule, by the way. If we haven't talked about this,
very loaded,
very loaded. So give me USC in that one. Penn State. Give me Penn State. It's on the road. UCLA, they're going to be reeling, I feel like, this year, so there ain't no way. And then lastly, at Oregon. Oregon's going to get their revenge in a major way, I think, to end this year off. Overall, that'd be 6-6 is what I've got them going, Chris. I'll love to hear your thoughts on this.
Man, I'm close. I have 7-5 at almost the exact same teams. I have the losses coming, obviously the Michigan game, the rematch of the national title. I think Michigan gets them again. Iowa, tough place to play at Iowa. We'll talk about Iowa, obviously, more on this channel as well. Indiana, tough game, though. I do think, though, Washington wins that one. USC, I think they drop one at USC, at Penn State, and then obviously Oregon to end the season. Christian, I do want to ask you a question here. What's the ceiling and what's the floor you think for the Huskies this season?
Well, Chris, I think, for us to really establish that, let's look back a little bit at Jedd Fisch and his programs. Right now, I understand, Arizona and Washington, two completely different programs. His first year at Arizona, they went 1-11. The next year, they went 5-7. Last year, he went 10-3. So he's had one really good year. He's a great coach. I like Jedd Fisch. I think obviously anybody in the country, whether it's Kirby Smart, whether it was Nick Saban, whether it was whoever you want to insert in there, right? You put them in, at that Arizona program, or just any Arizona program, it's going to take them a couple years to kind of get everything rocking and rolling. So getting back to where I think this translates for Washington, because they did have a complete roster overhaul. They are getting some guys from Arizona to come over to play for them. Chris, I think the floor for them, honestly, could be, as much as I hate to say it, I think there's a lot of other programs on this, on their schedule that have more certainty. Rutgers, Northwestern, just to name a few, they keep more players and they keep their head coaches intact, right? So that's pretty big. I think the first 3 games of the year obviously should be winnable. I would say their floor would probably be, God, I hate to say it, 4 or 5 wins this year. I would say the ceiling for them, and again, I got to really look and think about this, the ceiling would maybe be 8 wins, I would say. Maybe you can exact revenge against Michigan. You travel on the road and, play at Iowa or Indiana and maybe steal a game there. Again, I don't think Iowa's offense is going to be anything to write home about, so that could be an interesting game, but we know how good their defense is. We talk about Indiana, they're kind of an unknown, and they're kind of in a similar situation where they had roster turnover and they're breaking in a new, exciting coach. So who knows, right? That's kind of where I'm at. I would say, again, 4 or 5 wins is a floor. I'd say the ceiling probably give me 8, maybe 9 wins, right? So, but I think that 6-6 is pretty spot on. Chris, what about you?
Yeah, I actually agree with you 100% on both sides of this. Like I could see a way where they do go 5-7 this year. Like I said, when you lose 21 to 22 starters, I don't care if you're Georgia, Michigan, Alabama, any of these top tier teams, Texas, man, it's hard to do. And then you throw in a new coach and a new coaching staff. That's really not a recipe for success. As much as I like Jedd Fisch and what he did, and you touched on it, it's going to be very difficult. And this schedule does them no favors. I mean, this thing is pretty brutal to start even conference play, to be honest. A lot of people want to laugh at Rutgers, but Rutgers was a tough team last year, won 8 or 9 games. So did Northwestern. So, I mean, they get a lot of tough teams. I would say that the ceiling, I would honestly say 8 or 9 wins. I mean, they're probably not beating Oregon. They're probably not beating Penn State. And I honestly think you drop another game in there, best case scenario. I mean, Vegas got some pegged at 7.5 wins. So you and I are pretty close on this. And that's just the general betting public and Vegas alone. So, yeah, I would say 8 or 9 wins, Christian. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Huskies this season.